Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today on this beautiful morning. It's so nice outside. My name is Katie Earle. I'm the coordinator of our University Express program, and we're joined here today with Joe Fiegl from Erie County Department of Environment and Planning. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you.
And before we get into his presentation, we'll just quickly go over our housekeeping because it looks like we've got some new folks on here today, which is wonderful. We are recording the session, and so I'll try to post it on our website by the end of the week, which I guess would be tomorrow. And if you have any questions while Joe is speaking, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A panel, and we'll try to get to as many as we can in the time that we have. If you're on a computer, your Q&A panel is likely on your lower right-hand side of your screen. Just click on that to expand it. And then if you're on a tablet or smartphone, touch your screen. That brings up your control panel, and then you should be able to find your Q&A panel from there. So we hope you participate with us today. I'd like to thank the sponsors of our program, which is my Department of Senior Services, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Western New York, Excelsior Orthopedics, and Wegmans for all of their support. And as always, please do not hesitate to contact us at Senior Services if you or a loved one need any help, or if you're even not sure what you need. We're a great place to start. We're at 858-8526. Now let's learn about our star of the show today. Joe is Deputy Commissioner for Erie County's Division of Sewage Management, which is responsible for the 7 Erie County sewer districts. Prior to joining Erie County, Joe worked in engineering consulting. He is a licensed professional engineer in New York State, a board-certified environmental engineer, and a graduate of Northwestern University. And we're so happy he's here with us today. Joe, thank you. The floor is yours.
And thank you, Katie, and also thank you to all of you for signing up for this University Express course. It's not everyone that will see something on sewers and jump right on it, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to provide some interesting content for you. So as Katie mentioned, my job and responsibilities oversee the county's sewer districts, and I hope that this presentation will bring a smile to your face and introduce you to the wonderful world of sewers. To start off the presentation, I would like to ask 2 rhetorical questions. The first is, what or who is a polluter? If we were in person in a traditional format, I would ask folks to raise their hands and offer their suggestions. But for now, let's just think about that for a second. The second rhetorical question I'd like to pose is, what comes to mind when you think of sewers? Again, please just think about that for a second, and we will come back to that in both these questions later in the presentation. The title of this presentation is, So, What Happens After You Flush? And then I would be remiss if I did not get into the glamorous topic of home plumbing. When I give similar presentations at schools, it's at this point where I'll say, all right, kids, I hope your teacher's okay with this. We're going to have a little potty talk. The typical home has a water system that feeds various faucets, toilet tanks, washing machines, dishwashers, and other fixtures. That clean water is used for various purposes. I'm sure many of you used it today, brushing your teeth, washing your hands, perhaps mopping the floor, using the toilet, and much, much more. The used water is collected through a drain system. The drain system, shown in black on the figure here on the screen, is a series of pipes from all of these sources that combine together into a single, slightly larger pipe that exits your home. That single pipe that exits your home is referred to as your house or sewer lateral, which is shown in this figure exiting in the basement area of the home. How many of us have spent time thinking about their sewer lateral? If you haven't any problems with it, most probably spent 0 time thinking about it. The lateral in most municipalities is private, meaning that it's owned by the homeowner, and that's because it services a single residence. In modern days, that sewer lateral is typically connected to either a private septic system or, for most of us, a public sewer system. That is in today's world, but before I go any further, I'd like to go back 167 years. In 1854, London had an infamous cholera outbreak that forever changed the course of health and science. At the time, experts were not certain of the cause of the cholera outbreak in the city. Due to the stench in the area, it was theorized by some that the disease was airborne. It was not until Dr. John Snow meticulously traced the cases of cholera and observed certain patterns using his information gathering and mapping techniques that the epidemic was better understood. Dr. Snow had figured out there was a tie with human waste and drinking water sources. The famous removal of the handle of the Broad Street pump, still memorialized in London today, was a major way of fighting against the epidemic and is often cited as the start of what's referred to as the sanitary revolution. Many consider Dr. John Snow the father of epidemiology. Cholera epidemics were not isolated to London. The image on the left of the screen, for those that are on computers today, is an accounting of the causes of death in Buffalo, New York in September 1852. At that time, the city only had a population of around 75,000 people. In a 1-month time, cholera had accounted for 520 of the 707 deaths in the city. And that does not include other diseases that are typically waterborne, such as dysentery and typhoid fevers, or those that were classified as unknown at the time. The 520 deaths equates to approximately 0.7% of the entire population dying of a single disease in a single month. In today's numbers, that would be over 6,400 people dying of the disease in Erie County in a 30-day period. To provide some context, please don't think I'm minimizing the tragic circumstances we face in our current pandemic. But in 2020, Erie County lost on average 0.015% of its population per month due to COVID-19. Comparing to the 1852 cholera epidemic, that is a difference of a factor of over 45. That shows how devastating the cholera epidemic in Buffalo was in 1852. This is all because societies had grown and were living in closer quarters. With these large concentrations of population, proper protections from pollution associated with human waste had not yet been enacted. But getting back to that private lateral I referred to earlier, with advances in the understanding of disease, in the late 1800s, it was determined that the waste from homes needed to be redirected away from water supplies. That was the start of sewer systems, a network of pipes that collect the flows from individual properties and take them to another location. In the early days of sewers, oftentimes those collected flows were directly sent to streams and rivers. Water supply locations were then strategically selected to be away from these discharge points, the best they could. It was a common thought that dilution could be the solution to pollution. But while that's a catchy rhyme, dilution being the solution to pollution only went so far. As populations grew, the concentrations were such that waterways were highly impacted. In the early 1900s, the city of Buffalo was cited as the main source of intestinal disease in both the United States and Canada downstream of the city along the Niagara River and heading towards Lake Ontario. In 1907, the city of Niagara Falls had the highest death toll of typhoid fever in the world, which was attributed primarily to the growth of the city of Buffalo. Think about that. That was in the 20th century, not very long ago at all. Pretty incredible. There are disputes because of these impacts. Can you blame people? And to the point where King Edward VII of England, representing Canada, and President Howard Taft, representing the United States, signed a Boundary Waters Treaty to address these types of issues. The result was the formation of an International Joint Commission to study and enact policies regarding these shared waters. The commission is still in place today. One of the main advancements locally to improve the shared waters was the formation of the Buffalo Sewer Authority to capture those direct discharges to waterways and provide a basic level of treatment. The primary focus was disinfection. In the 1930s, the Buffalo Sewer Authority implemented what was at the time the largest wastewater chlorination system in the world at their newly constructed Bird Island wastewater treatment plant. As noted in the Courier Express article from 1939 shown here on the screen, 1 year after the facility went online, bacteria levels decreased by 97% in the Niagara River. Dilution was not the solution for environmental pollution either. This photo was in Time magazine in July of 1969 because the Cuyahoga River located in Cleveland started on fire. Amazingly, this was not the first or even the worst fire on the Cuyahoga, which per the Washington Post had ignited 12 times before. In fact, flare-ups were so common that the 1969 fire barely made headlines in the local papers. The picture in Time magazine was actually an archived image of a much larger fire from 17 years prior. Think about that. For decades, it was common for a local waterway to ignite. To give more context on the condition of the river, as noted in Time magazine, the Cuyahoga River was so saturated with sewage and industrial waste that it oozes rather than flows. Not at all a pretty picture. The Cuyahoga River was not the only water body to catch fire. Although less publicized, the Buffalo River also caught fire in 1968. There was so much oil and grease on the river that a worker accidentally ignited that blaze with a workman's torch. This wasn't a brazen act of vandalism or anything intentional. It was simply the conditions were so awful that a normal activity could cause the fire. That same year, the Federal Water Pollution Control Administration described the Buffalo River as a, quote, repulsive holding basin for industrial and municipal wastes, unquote, and essentially that it was devoid of oxygen and almost sterile. This reputation started to become more publicized a few years earlier when President Johnson visited Buffalo in 1966. At the meeting, President Johnson was presented a bucket of sediment and of water from the Buffalo River and was given a big spoon to stir it with. Can you imagine that being known with the president in today's age? When that occurred, Mrs. Johnson recoiled from the smell, and the president was disgusted. LBJ's response was fairly simple. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. The same year, Senator Robert Kennedy toured the Buffalo River and was quoted as saying, "This is as bad as anything I have seen." Of course, the Buffalo River connects near the terminus of Lake Erie, and poor Lake Erie. In the 1960s, several national publications declared Lake Erie dead due to toxic algal blooms that had depleted oxygen, would not allow fish to survive. It was so bad that when Dr. Seuss wrote the Lorax in 1971, of all things he could have chosen as an environmental problem, he used Lake Erie as an example. You're glumping the pond where the humming fish hummed. No more can they hum, for their gills are all gummed. I'm sending them off, or their future is dreary. They'll walk on their fins and get woefully weary. In search of some water that isn't so smeary, I hear things are just as bad in Lake Erie. With that pleasant thought, let's take a break for a minute and for a quick round of Jeopardy. We'll see if I can compete with Ken Jennings and Aaron Rodgers for host. Feel free to call out at home. I won't force you to answer in the form of a question. So let's see, we have some categories. The IT guy, published first. How about water bodies for 200? Our local county is named after this water body. Guessing a few of you got that one right. Next up, let's do water bodies for 400. This water body is where the city of Buffalo and other portions of our area receive its drinking water from. Guessing a few of you have gotten this one right too. Let's go water bodies for 600. This water body was so important to business and commerce that major canals in the US and Canada were connected to it. Let's see, Erie Canal. Guessing I could figure that one out. How about water bodies for 800? Evangola and Woodlawn Beach State Parks are located on this water body. Starting to notice a pattern. Let's close out the category, water bodies for 1,000. Chris Hoover of Fishing League Worldwide stated this water body was the #1 smallmouth bass fishery destination in the United States. Even if you do not know Chris Hoover or Fishing League Worldwide, hopefully you can answer this one based on the previous questions. The answers of all of them were Lake Erie. Our county is named after it. It is our drinking source. It is critical to commerce and economic development. It is used for beaches and recreation. It is a world-class fishery. It is amazing in the 1960s and before that we allowed this tremendous asset to deteriorate into such sad shape. By the mid-1960s, momentum had been swinging to address these problems. During President Johnson's previously referenced visit to Buffalo, he committed to quick and decisive action to save the Great Lakes. During a rally in the Niagara Square that day, he was quoted as saying, "Lake Erie must be saved. This great inland sea will sparkle again." The decisive action came after LBJ's presidency with the passage of the Clean Water Act. Quoting portions of the act directly, the Clean Water Act's stated goals were to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of nations' waters, that the discharge pollutants into navigable waters be eliminated, foster the protection and propagation of fish, shellfish, and wildlife, and provide for recreation, to prohibit the discharge of pollutants in toxic amounts, to provide financial assistance to construct publicly owned waste treatment works, develop and implement area-wide treatment management planning processes, initiate major research and demonstration, and develop programs for the control of non-point sources of pollution. In short, the Clean Water Act provided standards that needed to be met, money necessary to implement infrastructure to meet those standards, and research activities to bring about technological advancements. Clean Water Act noted specifically that it would provide financial assistance to construct publicly owned waste treatment works, or POTWs. The more common term used for these facilities that were built or the existing facilities that were upgraded was wastewater treatment plants. Wastewater treatment plants are, quote, pollutant discharge elimination systems. The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, or New York State DEC, issues state pollutant discharge elimination system permits to these facilities. And the permits are limitations that the facility must meet. Those limitations are determined by the New York State DEC, so the facility protects the uses of the water body it is discharging to. So, for example, you do not want a treated effluent from a wastewater treatment plant that is too acidic or too basic. Therefore, one parameter that is monitored is pH, and the pH must remain between certain numbers. The limits are typically a pH of 6 to 9, with 7 being neutral. Another example, phosphorus was a key item included in many permits, particularly those discharging to the Great Lakes, because phosphorus was determined to be a main culprit to toxic algal blooms that had plagued Lake Erie for decades. For most large facilities, a limit of 1 milligram per liter for phosphorus has been set. There are numerous other items that are tested and monitored at these facilities. Simply put, these plants eliminate pollutants they receive. The permits enforce the Clean Water Act standards, are designed to protect the use of the receiving water, and the permits are what the facilities use to govern their operation. So what does it take to eliminate that pollution? In short, it is a complicated step-by-step process. Each system or facility is a little bit different, so for the purposes of this presentation, I'll provide a general or typical examples of how these processes work. Some people may ask, what exactly is in sewage? Well, here's a partial list. Primarily, there is water, and that is what we attempt to recover from this waste stream. There's the other stuff, waste from people, toothpaste, toilet paper, oils and greases, bacteria, industrial byproducts. Those are the items that could potentially harm our waterways and what is removed or eliminated through the treatment process. So what happens after you flush? Well, first, that used water coming from the private laterals is collected through a sewer system. In most municipalities, there are two types of sewer systems in the road. One is referred to as the storm sewer system, which collects stormwater from the streets and other areas and conveys it to waterways. The second type is the sanitary sewer system, which is what your home's private lateral connects to and separately sends the collected sewage or wastewater to the treatment plant. There is one difference in Erie County. Within the city of Buffalo, there is what is referred to as a combined sewer system. What that means is the same pipes handle both storm and sanitary services. The sewage within sanitary sewer pipes generally flow by gravity. What that means is the pipe is gently sloped downward, with the sewage flowing from the higher point to a lower point. To provide access to the gravity sewer system, there are manholes in the streets. As these pipes combine with pipes from other areas, the sewers become bigger and bigger. For those on the computer, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show some video footage from televising work we perform in the sewer systems. Yes, we do send video cameras into sewers. In fact, these cameras can cost over $100,000 to procure. We have a crew that is on the road almost every day performing televising work to assess the condition of our sewers, see if there are problems, and more. There's not anything remarkable about this particular sewer section. It is a 10-inch diameter vitrified clay tile sewer, a pipe material that is hardly used at all anymore. I believe this sewer is approximately 70 years old. So just let me hit play here. So the camera is actually on crawler tracks. It almost looks like a tank as it's going through the sewer. The camera operator can pan and tilt and zoom in on different features depending on what they're looking at. So for those looking on the screen, you'll note that the camera operator has classified this as a tap break inactive at 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock being the location of where that tap is. I'm going to pause this video here for just a second. On the right-hand side of the sewer, you can see there's some things that are sticking out of one of the joints of the pipe. Those are actually tree roots. Tree roots attempt to find water, and of course there's a continuous water supply in sewer systems. In this instance, those are very, very minor and really aren't of concern to us, but there are times in which tree roots can completely block the entire flow. And we actually have specialized equipment that can be used to remove those tree roots and make sure that they don't cause further damage. So see the camera continues to move along. If there are any cracks or sags or collapses, camera operator would be noting that. Next year, we pan and tilted up to another potential feature. In this instance, this is referred to as a factory tap, and it's capped, meaning that it actually is not connected to another home. Same thing on this location. If the cap was not there, or if it was leaking, we would note that, and we'd come back and perform a repair on the sewer at that location. Coming up, you can already see another minor root, followed by another connection here. This is actually an active connection because you see there's a pipe that you can look further up into there. So our camera operator will note that that's a active tap. Hopefully we'll see that on the screen momentarily. Yep, right there. And it's at the 2 o'clock position on the pipe. Some other things that you note is that there are joints every roughly 3 feet as you're going through there. That's an older installation. Newer pipe sections are typically made of plastic, or what's referred to as PVC, and those joints are much longer than that. Joints are a potential area where there could be a failure in the pipe, also where we could have groundwater leaking into it, which is not a good situation at all. Although the goal is to have everything flow by gravity, the natural terrain, creeks, and other geographic features sometimes makes gravity flow infeasible. In those instances, the most common way to address it is by an installation of what's referred to as a pumping station. Think of a gas pump. There's a tank in the ground and a mechanical system to raise the gasoline to a higher level. Wastewater pumping stations also have tanks in the ground with pumps connected to them to move the sewage to either a higher level or another location. Unlike the gas pump, sometimes the discharge location can be several miles away. The Erie County sewer districts are responsible for approximately 100 wastewater pumping stations scattered throughout our area. These facilities range in size from those that can pump relatively small amounts, say 20 to 30 gallons per minute, to those that can pump millions and millions of gallons per day. The following is a photo of our Boston Valley pumping station located on Route 39. I'm just going to get laser pointer here. You'll probably notice the small building in the picture, this small gray box, the antenna, some yellow bollards, the paved area, and the fencing in this photo. It does not look like a whole lot is happening here. This picture is from the construction of the facility. As you can see, an enormous hole is needed to be dug, and quite deep, roughly 30 feet. You can tell by the perspective of the worker at the bottom of the hole in comparison to the length there. The main structure constructed here was the wet well for the pumping station. The wet well receives the sewage, and in this type of pumping station also houses the submersible pumps inside. 3 pumps are installed, as you can see, 1, 2, 3. And 2 of which are needed to handle the peak flows, and the 3rd is there for redundancy in case there are problems. Here's another view. The peak flow of these two pumps operating is approximately 4.6 million gallons per day, or roughly 3,200 gallons per minute. To put that in perspective, this station could empty an Olympic-sized swimming pool in less than 3.5 hours. This is not even close to the largest pumping station the county owns, operates, and maintains. A few other points. The antenna in the photo is part of the county's telemetry system, as you can see right there. The telemetry system allows communication between this station and our 24/7 control room so that this facility, along with all the other remote pumping stations, are continuously monitored. A large gray item, shown with the pointer here, is the backup generator for the pumping station. This facility must function under all conditions, and therefore, if there's a power outage, there needs to be a backup power source. There are serious problems if any of our facilities cannot function. We go to great lengths to make sure service is maintained. In fact, one of the most challenging aspects of this construction project was this was a pumping station replacement, meaning wastewater service needed to continue despite the significant construction work occurring at the site. Those that may be asking, the total cost of construction for this pumping station was almost $3 million. Once the flows make it through the sewers and pumping stations and enter the treatment plant site, the first step is what referred to as preliminary treatment. Preliminary treatment removes large debris up front to protect the equipment within the wastewater treatment plant. Just cue up the video here. Here we go. Internet is going very slow right now. There we go. This video provides a schematic of the most common preliminary treatment device, a screen. The typical screen configuration includes a series of thin metal bars placed in the wastewater flow stream where larger debris get caught. You can see that by all the black specks on the schematic here. As the screen could be clogged, there's a scraper or rake mechanism that removes the debris from the screen so that there is no backup. The debris is typically conveyed into some sort of hopper or compactor, which I believe is going to be shown right about now. You see the debris is removed and goes into the hopper, and that is subsequently disposed of in a dumpster. And then the rake goes back down and removes additional debris so that it does not clog the screen. You'd be amazed at some of the things found in a sewer system. There was one time we had a backup in our system and we found a bowling ball lodged in the pipe, which you can see in the photo on the left. Could you imagine getting that down the drain? In all seriousness, we're fairly certain someone illegally opened a manhole and threw it down there. Why? I have no idea. At the bar screens, there have been all sorts of strange items. The most recent thing found of interest was what looked to be a fairly new $100 bill. Do you see it there on the picture next to the other debris? Right in the center? After preliminary treatment, the next stage in the process is what's referred to as primary treatment. There are two main functions of primary treatment: to have solids sink to the bottom and to have oils, greases, and other floatables rise to the top. The solids that sink to the bottom, referred to as sludge, and sludge looks like it sounds, is disposed of through other processes in the treatment plant. Similarly, the oils, greases, and other floatables, also referred to as scum, and we have very glamorous terms in the wastewater business, that scum is skimmed off the top and also disposed of. The typical means to conduct primary treatment is with equipment referred to as clarifiers. They are essentially large tanks, some circular, others rectangular. On the surface, it does not appear that there is much going on. However, there is a significant amount of equipment that is required to optimize treatment. For simplicity's sake, I will focus on the circular style clarifiers. Influent sewage enters in what's referred to as the center well, so it comes up through here. The flow disperses from the center, which you can see from the arrows on the figure. The tanks are sized for the expected peak flows and the expected makeup of the sewage to promote settling of solids. The solids settle on the bottom. On the bottom is a scraper mechanism to collect the sludge. At the top is something referred to as a baffle. What that baffle does is keeps the flow material in, the center, and while allowing for the cleaner effluent to exit through the sides. There's also what's referred to as a skimmer at the top that will collect those floatables and that scum. The sludge and scum are disposed of, and the rest of the effluent goes on to the next step. Before the Clean Water Act, many treatment plants consisted of preliminary and primary treatment, sometimes followed by disinfection. Clean Water Act brought forth widespread integration of what is referred to as secondary treatment. There are a few types of secondary treatment processes, but for this presentation, I will discuss the most widespread, the activated sludge technology. Much of what is done at treatment plants is taking what happens in nature and speeding it up. There are bacteria and other microorganisms in nature that, quote unquote, eat organic materials, nutrients, and solids over time. Many of these microorganisms are found in nature and are also present in sewage. In the activated sludge process, we create environments ideal for the microorganisms to consume those materials so those pollutants may ultimately be removed from the sewage. One of the ways is by mixing and aerating the waste stream and engineering the facilities such that optimal pollutant removals can occur. The following two videos are from under the microscope using 1,000 times magnification. These videos were taken at the county's certified laboratory for wastewater testing. The first video is of raw sewage, which is shown on the left. In the video, you can see various microorganisms moving freely throughout the liquid. They are relatively well dispersed and not very concentrated. In the second video, you can see the conditions in the secondary treatment system. Because we have promoted ideal conditions with aeration, mixing, and returning activated sludge to the system, you note a much higher concentration of microorganisms. These microorganisms are metabolizing and consuming solids, organics, nutrients, and other microorganisms, and more in these conditions, and much quicker than in nature. Many microorganisms accumulate together in what's referred to as floc in our industry, FLOC. The development of floc has the added benefit of promoting settling in subsequent treatment steps. So what are some of the examples of pollutant removal? I'll ask you all to remember back to high school chemistry class. Do you recall what this nasty looking molecule is? Well, it's not nasty. It is glucose, or common sugar. Think about a glass of water. If you pour some sugar into it and stir it around, what happens? Well, it dissolves and you do not see the sugar anymore. However, just because you cannot see it does not mean it isn't there, as evidenced by the taste when you drink that same glass of water. There are plenty of dissolved components in wastewater that need to be removed. In the example of sugar or glucose, it is a fairly simple reaction promoted by the microorganisms in the secondary treatment process. Again, harkening back to high school chemistry class, glucose has the molecular formula of C6H12O6. As I noted earlier, this example of secondary treatment process includes aeration to make sure there are proper levels of oxygen, or O2, in the environment. Just like we breathe in oxygen and use it for bodily functions and exhale carbon dioxide, microorganisms promote similar reactions in the process. So as you can see, C6H12O6 plus O2 yields carbon dioxide and water. There are thousands and thousands of these types of reactions in the secondary treatment process that eliminate pollutants and produce a cleaner water. After aeration and mixing have stirred up the processed liquids, the next step is another stage of clarifiers to remove solids, or the sludge, remove the floatables, or the scum, and allow the cleaner water to proceed to additional treatment. The setup is very similar to the clarifiers described earlier. The tanks are sized for the expected peak flows and the expected makeup of the sewage to promote settling of solids. At the top is a baffle that keeps the floatable materials in, with a skimmer arm to collect those floatables. At the bottom is a scraper mechanism to collect the sludge. In some clarifiers, chemicals may be added to assist with settling the sludge or removing additional pollutants. This video shows the top of a secondary clarifier. Hit play. The circular metal plate, which is shown here, referred to as a baffle, extends a few inches into the water and keeps the floatable materials in the center. You can see here, you see some of the oils and greases that are floating inside of there, but aren't making their way to the other end. You can see the skimming mechanism here, slowly turning and collecting that scum or those oils and greases. Below the surface, solids are settling and the sludge is collected as well. Let's hit play one more time. Sorry about that. Video stopped. Below the surface, solids are settling and sludge is collected as well. And you can see the cleaner water overtopping the weirs in the lower right-hand corner. For some facilities, there is an additional polishing step required after a secondary treatment process, referred to as tertiary treatment. Generally, tertiary treatment entails the addition of a filtration step. Cue up this video. Again, internet's a little slow today. Okay, great. Similar to a swimming pool, the water is sent through some sort of filter material. So you can see at the top here, water is accumulating. And then it will slowly make its way through the filter material. Small solid particles will be kept in the filter while the cleaner water flows through. I'm going to rotate the view here. So periodically, you'll need to backwash the wastewater filter. Again, similar to a pool filter. Water will be sent up through the filter material itself. And you'll see here that the solid particles then come up to the top. And then that's flushed away. And that filter backwash is then sent to the beginning of the treatment plant so that it could be properly cleaned. In the secondary treatment process, the bacteria and other microorganisms were critical for the removal of pollutants. However, as we discussed at length earlier in the presentation, bacteria in high concentrations in our waterways contributed to significant illness. Therefore, the final step in the process is disinfection. The most common disinfection method is chlorination. Again, similar to a swimming pool, chlorine is added to the water to oxidize the bacteria, viruses, and other microorganisms. Another disinfection technology used in our industry is ultraviolet or UV. Have you ever heard the phrase sunlight is the best disinfectant? There is both a metaphorical and a scientific basis behind that quotation. When on the Supreme Court, Justice Brandeis used this phrase to highlight how publicity and transparency can combat corruption. In nature, sunlight is indeed very effective at killing bacteria and viruses. UV disinfection equipment produces certain wavelengths in the UV spectrum and shines that light into the effluent. The UV light alters the DNA of the microbes, and by altering the DNA, the microbes cannot reproduce. Therefore, the colony dies off. The final step is discharge to our natural environment. We no longer call this wastewater. Instead, we refer to it as treated effluent. This treated effluent has been cleaned to meet stringent standards to be protective of the designated uses of the water body. In this instance, Lake Erie is used as a drinking water source for fishing and recreation and more. Wastewater treatment plants are being rebranded. And did you know that the sewer business needed to be branded in the first place? The new terminology being used is water resource recovery facilities. If you think about it, that makes sense. These plants receive the sewage, and what they do is recover clean water so that it may be returned to the environment. Water is a precious and finite resource, and hence should not be quote-unquote wasted. Therefore, these are water resource recovery facilities. That being said, despite my best efforts, my friends still refer to them as poop plants. These images provide a visual contrast between the influent raw sewage on the left and the treated effluent on the right. As we discussed earlier, there's a lot you cannot see: the removal of dissolved components, bacteria, and more. That also differentiates the two waters. Nevertheless, a fairly striking difference, right? The image in the center is a summary of all the testing requirements of one of our wastewater treatment plants. The county has its own certified laboratory that performs numerous tests to ensure the process is performing well and to standards. There's even sampling and testing equipment that will monitor certain parameters on almost a minute-by-minute basis. The image in the center is certainly not meant to be read, but it illustrates how highly regulated and monitored the process is. One item I did not cover is what happens to the solids or sludge collected at the bottom of the clarifiers. Well, there's a whole other process to handle the solids for proper disposal. A big part of this is removing water from that solid stream. Again, these are water resource recovery facilities. But on a practical basis, whether the final disposal is land application, incineration, composting, or landfill, the more water in the material is being disposed, the more expensive it is. One interesting aspect of the solids process is that you can actually generate energy. How so? Well, certain facilities have equipment and tanks that are referred to as anaerobic digesters. The digesters are designed to maintain temperatures between 95 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, to be completely mixed, and to have no oxygen. Very similar to the human digestion system. Also similar to the human digestion system, solids are broken down, and one of the byproducts is, well, gas. Methane, to be precise. Some facilities can burn that methane to heat their boiler systems or to even power an engine to produce electricity. There are facilities that have started to accept food wastes and other organics to feed into their digesters and produce even more energy. Some farms even use this technology to manage manure. Water resource recovery facilities are named as such because clean water is recovered from the sewage. But the example of anaerobic digesters demonstrates there are other resources that can be recovered. There's a lot of emerging research on how these facilities can transform into utilities of the future to continue protecting waterways, but also manage the entire process to maximize the community benefit. Production of energy, capturing nutrients, reducing electrical loads, utilizing treated effluent for other purposes. These are all ways sewer utilities are working to do more at and with these facilities. So now that you've heard about the history, the process, and how everything works, I'd like to go back to the beginning of the presentation where I asked what or who is a polluter. When I asked that question, did any of you think of the industries or these discharges that are shown here on the screen? What about Cousin Eddie from the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation movie, unloading his RV tank into the storm sewer? Did anyone think about the sewer industry as a polluter? How about these two? The point of this slide is that all of us, children, teenagers, adults, we all utilize water for various purposes, and the used water that goes down the drain is pollution. That doesn't make us dirty. In fact, it's a big part of keeping us all clean. But we need to understand our role in dealing with that pollution. So what are our responsibilities as polluters? First, we need to make sure we responsibly pollute. One major challenge sewer service providers face is when people put things down the drain or into the toilet that they should not. And I'm not just talking about the bowling ball from earlier. I think you all can handle that. For example, only the 3 P's, poop, pee, and toilet paper, should be flushed down the toilet. Why? The sewer pipes, pumps, and other equipment are not designed to pass many of those other items. And those other items could be things like wipes, paper towels, and other similar cleaning products. What often results is something like this, where a pump becomes clogged with those materials. That requires our employees to immediately respond to unclog the equipment or perform repairs. Sometimes it's a nice sunny Thursday morning, just like today, but other times it is Sunday at 2 o'clock in the morning during a driving rainstorm, or on Thanksgiving Day. Hopefully this video loads a little quicker than the other ones. This video just provides a demonstration of problems with flushing things other than the 3 Ps. It's too early for happy hour, right? You can see that the toilet paper, with some gentle agitation, breaks up fairly easily, and it's designed to. The wipe, on the other hand, does not, and you can see the results. If you're not concerned with the public sewer system and the poor sewer worker responding at 2 o'clock in the morning, remember these items can clog your internal plumbing or your lateral. That could cause a couple $100s in plumbing bills, depending on the severity. So if it's not toilet paper, put it in the trash. Fats, oils, and greases, or fog, are also an issue. If you've been paying attention, you may be saying, but Joe, I saw clarifiers that the treatment plants are designed to remove these types of items. That is correct. However, the fats, oils, and greases that make their way to the treatment plant are supposed to be, things like oils from your skin, perhaps small amounts left on a plate that you cannot wipe off, those type of things. That does not mean the grease left over from cooking bacon or used vegetable oil or similar items should be put down the drain. Why? Well, when hot, these items may flow, but as they cool, these items solidify. This is what can happen. At one of our pumping stations, one of our employees had to literally shovel out solidified grease. So what should you do? Wipe off the dishes with a napkin or paper towel if that works. Otherwise, pour used oil or grease into a can or jar, let it cool, and then throw it out. Running hot water and putting it down the drain is not proper. In fact, it can also clog your pipes or your lateral, causing problems at your house as well, which means that you may, again, incur plumbing costs. Pharmaceuticals are also something to be mindful of properly disposing. Many are rightly concerned about these items getting to other people's hands, particularly for safety around the home, and because, unfortunately, certain types of medications are misused. Unused medications should be disposed of at various drop-off locations. There are dozens of them in our county. The reason is that treatment plants or water resource recovery facilities are designed to remove certain pollutants, but other pollutants they are not designed to remove. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of pharmaceuticals, and while some are removed at these facilities, others pass right through. That means certain compounds can make their way into the environment, which could cause problems to aquatic life if it's in high enough of a concentration. The final polluter responsibility I'd like to highlight is that we have to fund sewer services. I spoke of the pipes, the pumping stations, the treatment plants, and more. All of this infrastructure is costly to install, and it must be operated and maintained by professionals to ensure the infrastructure is reliable and functions properly. This is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week, no holidays off essential business. It is one that needs proper funding to ensure the essential services are provided. If you ask someone if they could live without their cell phone or their internet service, many would say that that is a necessity in today's world. As you can see on this chart, people are willing to pay for it. Clean water, which is at the bottom of the chart, is not often seen as a necessity. That is a perfect segue into the second question I posed when we started this presentation. What comes to mind when you think of sewers? Has your answer changed since the beginning? I'm hoping one item that comes to mind is the protection of public health. A few years ago, the British Medical Journal polled its readers and asked what was the greatest medical achievement of the last 150 years. Proper sanitation was selected, surpassing all other medical advances, including anesthesia, antibiotics, the discovery of DNA, and vaccines. Can you imagine a surgery without anesthesia? What about the importance of antibiotics? In today's times, do I need to say anything about vaccines? The reason sanitation was selected, well, if you look at the life expectancy before advances in sanitation, the average lifespan was around 40 years, as you can see here on the chart. From the late 1800s into the 1900s, life expectancy increased roughly 50% to over 60 years of life expectancy. And that was in large part due to the implementation of modern sanitation. Sewer services were critical to that advancement. Besides the critical role in protecting public health, I hope you all will also think about protecting the environment when thinking of sewers. In the early to mid 20th century, our waterways were in deplorable condition. In the last 50 plus years, we have seen tremendous advances. No longer is the Buffalo River devoid of life and ready to start on fire. Now it is an area people gravitate towards to have fun, for recreation, and more. Now, by no means are waterways perfect. I hope that is not a takeaway. There are still problems, and hence there is still much work to do. But we must acknowledge how far we have come and that the investments put forth have made meaningful improvements. Did you think of making Erie County greater when you answered the question earlier? This is the oldest report in our division's library, Progressive Sewer Systems for a Greater Erie County. Before there was an Erie County legislature, the county was governed by a board of supervisors. After World War II, the Board of Supervisors saw the uncoordinated, uneconomical, and unsatisfactory manner in which sewer services were being handled as a major problem, and one of which would limit our area if not addressed. This business is not glamorous, but it is important. What resulted was the formation of the Erie County Sewer Districts a few years later. So, what happens after you flush? In short, a lot. I hope you gained a better knowledge and appreciation for the wonderful world of sewers and water resource recovery. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. That was awesome.
Thanks.
Great information, great jokes, and we have a lot of questions here, so we'll see how many we're able to get through. I'll give you a second before I toss them your way.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. So the first question is there any ongoing maintenance that we should be doing for our laterals, / what are the warning signs that it's about to blow?
It's a great question. So depending on the age and the condition of your lateral, there can be different maintenance that can be performed. If your house is constructed probably before the 1980s or the 1970s, most likely your lateral is constructed of either vitrified clay tile or another similar type of material. That'll have the shorter lengths of pipe with the many joints that I referred to, and that can cause issues with regard to roots getting in there and other sorts of things. So sometimes what folks will do as a maintenance is they'll have a plumber come in and check their lateral. They have cameras that they can do to look through it. They also have root cutting equipment if they do have a backup. The other thing is oftentimes in either yards or sometimes outside of the cellar wall, there will be a vent. You want to make sure that remains clear so that sewer gases can be vented into the air as opposed to making their way into the houses themselves. The other thing is just kind of good practice. Again, as I mentioned, not putting oils and greases down there, which could clog your laterals. Some of those, flushable, what people refer to as wipes and paper towels and things like that, making sure that those don't get in there because that certainly clog as well. The way that you know a problem, oftentimes, if you have a basement, you may see water backing up into either into like a wash tub or something like that. That's generally how people start to notice that they have a problem.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joe. The next question here is, are there peak times for sewage, like certain days, times, seasons, or is it pretty consistent or constant?
So yeah, there's actually a whole area of study called sewer sociology that looks at the flows of sewers and tries to equate it to human behaviors and activities. Generally, what you'll see is that flows will increase starting around 6 a.m. and go through the middle of the morning, and that's because people are showering and brushing their teeth and getting ready for the day. You'll see a similar type of pattern when folks return back home, if they're working out of the home, because folks start preparing for dinner, using the facilities, putting in a load of wash, all those type of things. So that during the course of a day, you will see what's referred to as a diurnal pattern, where you see a peak flows in the morning and also around dinner time. And then flows are generally lower, obviously, at night when most people are sleeping. But that's not a hard and fast rule. It depends on if you have some large industries that operate around the clock and they're discharging a lot of flow into the system. Because if they have 3 shifts that they are operating, then they have relatively consistent flows. There is, sometimes, they talk about during the Super Bowl, during halftime, you see an increase because people are using the facilities at the time. That's not as dramatic as people may think, but there's certainly some impacts there. If there's a large event, we actually have equipment when the Erie County Fair is going on. We place flow meters in place there to monitor their increased flows. A lot of other type of examples.
It's really interesting. Not something I would have thought of before. The next question here is, how long does it take from flush to being re-entered back into the water?
It is highly dependent on a few different factors. The first is the physical distance from your home to the treatment plant. As you can imagine, the further away you are, the longer it takes to get to the treatment plant itself. Generally, we want to promote flows at a velocity around 2 feet per second. So you can then, if you could calculate that from your distance from the treatment plant and how many miles of sewer it needs to go through, there's that amount of time there. Then for the amount of time for it to go through the entire treatment process, again, that's dependent upon the amount of flow that's coming in. So there's certain times where it goes a little bit quicker because we have more flow that's coming through, and there's times where it takes a little bit longer, just simply because we're in lower flows, and hence the tankage has larger volume to be able to process those needs. So it really is kind of dependent, and we design the system such that it can really account for those types of variations.
Thanks, Joe. The next question is, as a homeowner, how can I find out if my sanitary sewer is combined with the storm sewer outside of my house?
Locally, if you're in the city of Buffalo, most of the city of Buffalo is a combined sewer system. If it's outside of the city of Buffalo, within Erie County, and it's going to be a separate system.
Okay, thanks. This says, you said that chlorine is used in waste treatment. Has there been any shortages of chlorine during the pandemic?
That actually, excellent question. Literally yesterday, we received a notice from our vendor that provides sodium hypochlorite, which is the type of chlorine that we use for our disinfection processes, and said that they have concerns with regard to the amount of chlorine that they're able to deliver. That literally happened yesterday, so a very timely question. That is something that is of paramount concern to us, because we want to make sure that we continue to provide our disinfection around the clock. Fortunately, we have large tanks that we store the sodium hypochlorite in, and we looked at it, and we have several weeks available to us to be able to withstand any sort of shortage of supplies, as long as it doesn't go on for a long time. We've never had an instance where we have not been able to get a delivery in time to be able to provide proper disinfection. But a very, very timely question, because literally emails went around yesterday afternoon about that.
Oh, and Joe, I know we're coming up on time here. We just have 3 more questions. Is that okay?
I'm willing to address any questions that come in. I don't have a immediate meeting right after this, so I have a little extra time.
Okay, thank you. This one is, does Erie County use any resource recovery in sewage treatment?
We do. It's something that we want to promote even further. So we do have anaerobic digester at one of our treatment plants that we utilize to power a boiler. We're looking at other means to do those type of things. The challenge is that we don't necessarily have anaerobic digesters at all of our treatment plants, and so we looked at how much it would cost to implement that at one of our treatment facilities a couple of years ago, and that was a $20 million project. So then we look at, okay, well, what are going to be the benefits, because we'll decrease our natural gas usage at the facility, can we generate some energy that would be able to decrease that? And so those are the type of things that we are looking to promote even further. Some of the emerging topics, there's talk about perhaps be able to actually harvest phosphorus out of wastewater. That's something that we've tried to do a little bit of research on. We've been working with University of Buffalo because there is some algal treatment that they're looking at. So we really try to work with various different entities to see if we can implement some of these things at our facilities. Some of the challenges, unfortunately, some of this infrastructure is extremely costly, and we really need to be investing also in our existing infrastructure to make sure that we continue to protect public health and protect the environment.
Yeah, for sure. This question's actually perfect. This person's wondering if any nearby water resource recovery facilities accept food waste for their anaerobic digesters.
Oh, that's a great question. I want to say that there are some private entities that are taking in food scraps and food waste, specifically from food operators and things like that. I want to say the Buffalo Sewer Authority has been looking into this quite extensively because they have very large digesters at their facility that they have some excess capacity in. But it's been a while since I've gotten an update from them on that project, so I don't want to give wrong information at this point. But I can tell you that there's several plants in New York State that are starting to implement those type of things because they know they have some dedicated food scrap and food waste feedstock that can really help. One example is there is a yogurt plant that is further downstate that is directly adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant or water resource recovery facility in that area. And the yogurt manufacturer and the sewer treatment plant operators have worked together to accept that waste, and they're generating a significant amount of electricity off of their anaerobic digesters because of that.
Wow, that's really interesting. This next question is, I've read about water resource recovery facilities having the ability to monitor methamphetamine use and spikes in COVID cases. Is that being done here in Erie County?
Yep, we not methamphetamine, although that's something that we could potentially use down the line, but we have partnered with the Department of Health along with some other local service providers, and we've been taking samples twice a week of our wastewater to measure. It's not necessarily measuring COVID. What it's looking for is particles of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is the virus that causes COVID. And it's not active virus, it's dead, but you can actually find the RNA of those virus particles, and you can quantify that the amount of RNA that's in the wastewater sample. And then from there, you can come up with a relation that, okay, we have, say, 1 million virus copies in a certain day, and then we have 2 million another day. Well, that gives some sort of indication that you're having a rise of COVID-19 in the area upstream of that water resource recovery facility. And the reason why that is because the research shows that people that are positive with COVID-19 actually shed the virus through their stool. And that's why we can monitor that in the sewage or the wastewater. So that's something that we've been working with actually University of Buffalo along with the Department of Health. And we're actually hoping to, and this is something we're hoping to talk with the University of Buffalo next week. We think we can actually test for various, some of the variants of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and be able to kind of detect that in the wastewater. this is something that really has ballooned over the last year's time, as you can imagine. And there's a lot of water resource recovery facility operators, including Erie County, that are trying to help out their local health departments along that topic.
That's really fascinating work. Holy cow.
Yeah,
And
and then I'm sorry to interrupt, but with regard to methamphetamines, once the system has been in place, I have read about communities that have been able to look at, say, opioids, methamphetamines, and other things that may be excreted by those that are using those illicit drugs, and they can get a better sense of perhaps certain areas in which there is a higher incidence of use than others.
wow, that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, as I say to people, if you think about it, a doctor's office, sometimes they take a urine sample, or they take at a veterinarian's office, they take a stool sample. There's a lot of things that could be learned from people's wastes. And, as sewer systems, we can look at this on a larger community-wide basis as opposed to an individual by individual basis. So it's anonymous. We can't necessarily tell exactly where, someone has COVID-19 and is shedding that in their stool, but we know the general vicinity of which that's occurring, and how prevalent it may be.
Whoa, that is wild, all of the things that you can learn from that.
Yeah.
And Joe, you actually answered one of the questions about finding the mutations of SARS-CoV-2, so thank you for that without even knowing it. And I'm just seeing one final question here, and it's, with all the new construction, will more plants have to be established to keep up with treatment?
Um, there's a pretty extensive process that projects need to go through to be able to determine if they can be sited at a certain location. And one of those key factors is there adequate sewer capacity to be able to handle the peak flows that would be coming from the proposed development. As I mentioned earlier, one of the key considerations when they had that progressive sewer systems for a greater Erie County was developing long-term planning to be able to handle the needs of what they expected the community would be. So one unfortunate thing is the Buffalo Sewer Authority expected that the city of Buffalo was going to grow at a much larger rate than it actually ended up doing. So what that means is they do have quite a bit of capacity in their system to be able to allow for some of this development. That's a good thing now, but it's a bad thing that unfortunately our population didn't grow the way that was once thought. Similar type of things have been done at different treatment plants, throughout our area. I will say that some of them do need to be upgraded because, the planning period was maybe 30 to 40 years, and, the Clean Water Act was passed in the 70s. So we're now past that 30 to 40-year time period, and hence the treatment plants need to be expanded. I'm not aware of any new treatment plants that are going to be constructed locally to handle any sort of development, but that has happened in other areas in the country.
Okay, thank you for that information. Now I'm just seeing a bunch of thank yous. So thanks for the job you do. Thank you for explaining everything so clearly. And thank you for giving us presentation to us. So thanks, Joe.
I really, and I mean this sincerely. I think you can tell this is a job that I'm passionate about. I'm an environmental engineer. I believe in the importance of what we do. I believe that we need to continue to improve. And I really just appreciate that people actually take an interest in trying to learn a little bit more about this and to understand it. I don't expect people to be as passionate about it as I am, but if a few folks ended up gaining a little bit better appreciation for the importance of the sewer industry, then I'm thrilled. So thank you. I appreciate everyone for joining and for all the great questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we always have a lot of questions for you. It just shows the interest there. So again, all right, Joe, enjoy your day. I'll talk with you offline. Everybody else, thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.